You wanna, you wanna, you wanna hot body, you wanna Bugatti, you wanna Maserati, you better what, you wanna Lamborghini.
Welcome, and thank all of you for joining us for this Art in the Libraries virtual program. I'm Beth Torin, Interdisciplinary Cultural and Film Studies Librarian, here for Sally Brown, Exhibits Coordinator for WVU Libraries and Lead Curator of Food Justice in Appalachia, our forthcoming 2021-22 multidisciplinary exhibit. As a reminder, this session is being recorded and will be documented on the library's website for public viewing. We welcome questions in the chat box, and we'll share responses in a discussion at the end of the presentations. So if your question is for someone in particular, please indicate that in the chat box, and I'll post their names there as we go. And we'll also post a survey link to get your feedback on the session. So today, March 24, 2021, National Equal Pay Day. Women's wages catch up to men's from 2020. And we welcome a panel of several advocates, delegates, and senators, all working to address this gap and to honor two women with West Virginia roots from Hidden Figures, Katherine Johnson and Dorothy Vaughan, with several pieces of legislation they will discuss. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to speak. And as questions occur to you, just drop them in the chat or remember them when all the panelists have spoken. They'll have time to respond. And let's see, now I'm honored to turn it over to our panel. We'll start with three advocates, beginning with Kelly Allen, Executive Director of the West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy. Director Allen.
Thanks, Beth. I'm really happy to be with you all today on National Equal Pay Day, which, as Beth said, is the day which women on average have to work into the next year to make what men made in the previous year. This is due to the gender pay gap, one of the most prominent and costly examples of women's ongoing struggle for gender equity. But the gender pay gap doesn't impact all women equally. It's actually worse in West Virginia than it is nationally, where women working full-time year-round make on average 74 cents for every dollar a man working full-time year-round makes. And of course, there's an intersecting racial and gender wage gap, meaning that Black women won't hit their equal pay day for a couple more months. In West Virginia, they make 63 cents on the dollar compared with men, and Latino women make just 60 cents. West Virginia has the largest pay gap and the lowest median earnings of any of our surrounding states. And we actually have the third largest pay gap in the nation, behind only Louisiana and Utah. And of course, women making less doesn't only impact women, it impacts entire families and our whole state through our economy. In 2017 alone, the gender pay gap resulted in $3.7 billion with a B, dollars in lost earnings for women in West Virginia. This is money that could have supported families, supported businesses, and grew our economy. And while we know a lot about what makes up the gender wage gap, it includes educational attainment, union status, occupational and industries that are predominantly male versus predominantly female, and race, there's still a big segment, about 41% of the gap, that's unexplained by research. And that's why I'm so excited and happy that we're having this panel today to address how we can use win-win policy to overcome these factors, like pay secrecy, discrimination, the motherhood penalty. These factors, again, don't only improve wages for women, but improve morale and productivity in the workplace, helping businesses, and increasing both family and economic stability. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Allen. Now I'm pleased to introduce the President of the West Virginia National Organization for Women, NOW, Meredith Hartery. President Hartery.
Thanks, Beth. I'm Meredith Hartery. I'm the president of West Virginia NOW, the National Organization for Women. And I'm excited here to be able to talk a little bit about the impact that the Katherine Johnson and Dorothy Vaughan Fair Pay Act could have here in the Mountain State. As Kelly said, transparency and secrecy in and around wages and salary histories are really detrimental. When we're looking at salary histories that can be required as a that are a requirement for employment, any pay disparities will actually follow a worker from job to their new job. And according to research, salary history requirements appear to account for most of the persistence of residual wage gaps. When we look at how that will affect West Virginian women, closing the wage gap could reduce the poverty rate of women in West Virginia by a third. That type of reduction could have an economic ripple effect across the state that benefits all West Virginians, not just women and children. Another piece of this bill looks at how employees are able to freely talk about their wages. This isn't new in the public sector, and those in the private sector should also have the same freedoms. Transparency in wage helps level the pay gaps, and people are more likely to be paid what they're worth. When folks are able to talk about their earnings, they're paid more fairly and stay in their jobs longer. This benefits and creates stability for employees and employers. And this would benefit all of West Virginia. Thank you.
Thank you, President Hartery. I'm now delighted to introduce Owens Brown, President, West Virginia National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP. President Brown.
Well, thank you for having me here on such a momentous day. You know, the NAACP, when it was formed in 1909, was for equal pay for women and equal pay for everyone. You know, we realized that the African-American woman has really been the backbone who really have gotten Black people through. In many of those years, Black men couldn't get work, so we depended upon our Black women to support our family or help support our families. Even today, where wages are still unequal for African-American men compared to white men, Black women make up the difference. And we've always looked at that as a partnership. But you know, it's really unconscionable that 150 white men in the West Virginia legislature will have the absolute power to determine the economic well-being of hundreds of thousands of women in the state of West Virginia. You know, House Bill 3247, the Katherine Johnson Vaughn Fair Pay Act will define the morality of this legislature as to whether to stop treating women as second-class citizens by giving West Virginia women a fair wage for their labor. In 2021, women in West Virginia are still struggling for fair wages, the same as Katherine Johnson and Katherine Vaughn has struggled for fair wages 68 years ago. These two West Virginia women were extraordinary women who played an important role in the success of the United States space program, and yet they did not receive a fair wage or respect that their male co-workers received. All West Virginia women in the labor force cannot be Katherine Johnson or Dorothy Vaughn, but they play the most important role of the success of or failure of their families' financial well-being. And it's based on the wages they earn. You know, again, Katherine Johnson and Sarah Vaughn and Dorothy Vaughn, you know, were trailblazers in this, but even with their extraordinary genius, they still were not respected financially with wages or with position. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Brown, and each of you advocates for the work you do. And now I'm pleased to introduce the first delegate speaking with us today, Delegate Barbara Evans Fleischhauer of Monongalia County. Delegate Fleischhauer.
Thank you, Beth, and thank you to our advocate speakers and all the advocates that are with us today and all the legislators that will be joining us. This is a really special day. Well, it's a bad day. You could say it's, we used to have an unhappy hour in Morgantown because of the big pay gap that we have. And what I want to talk to you, I hope somebody will, I appreciate what you said, Owens, about Dorothy Vaughn and Katherine Johnson being geniuses. They were geniuses from West Virginia, and they were not paid fairly. And they helped our country land a person on the moon. I mean, it's just so insulting. And it's insulting that so many women and men don't know what other people are making at work and get lowballed when they first get a job. And so we have 4 bills in the legislature, 2 Senate bills and 2 House bills, and I'm going to briefly explain what they do. One, as Meredith mentioned, is about salary range transparency. And so what that part of the bill says, and employers may not inquire about your past salary history when you're applying for a job until they offer you a job. And that's to stop that pay discrimination from following you job after job. The second part about it is pay transparency. And as maybe Kelly and Meredith mentioned, all government publishes people's salary. It's the private sector that's different, but not in 19 states where they have passed, let me make sure I have that right. 19 states and 21 local governments have passed salary range transparency, and 15 states have passed pay transparency, which allows you to ask about the wages of your fellow employees. And so the other employee has to agree to that. They don't have to tell you what their wages are without consenting to that, but you are allowed to disclose your wages and you're allowed to have that conversation. And employers are not allowed to penalize anybody for having a conversation about their wages. So where are we right now with these 4 bills? Well, we're not in a good spot. We have a 60-day session, and crossover day is when bills have to pass one house, their house of origin. And nothing on these 4 bills has passed yet. In fact, nothing has even been placed on a committee. They have to get on a committee by the end of this week. So, and then they have to pass, the session ends on April 10th. Crossover day is March 31st. So we are really at a critical point right now. So what can you do? Well, there are things you could do, and the judiciary chairs are the ones that will put these bills on the agenda. That's Moore Capito, who is on the House side. He is open to putting it on the agenda, and Charles Trump has previously put a bill like this on the agenda. He's in the Senate. Charles Trump's telephone number, if you want to call him, is 357-7880. Moore Capito is 340-3252, and their emails are more.capito@wvhouse.gov and charles.trump@wvsenate.gov. Give them a call, send them an email, say, please put this on the agenda so that we can have fair pay for everyone. Thanks, Beth. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Delegate Fleischhauer. And we now welcome from Marion County, Senator Mike Caputo. Senator Caputo.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and thanks for organizing this event. I want to take a moment to thank the leadership on this call for all you do each and every day to try to move forward issues such as this and other discriminatory practices, unfortunately, that we see happening all across our country, but predominantly here in West Virginia. We always seem to be 20 years behind everyone else, and it's saddening. I want to thank Delegate Barbara Fleischhauer, who, when I was a freshman delegate, I came to Charleston not knowing much about the process, but I knew who my friends were. And she was certainly one of them, and she taught me a lot about the process, and she taught me a lot about how to fight for things that, even if they seem bleak at times, you can't ever give up. And so, Barbara, personally, thank you. Thank you for your leadership in championing women's rights issues. And I will always have your back because you have always had mine. So we should be honored that she's with us today. I wish we could, Barbara went over the processes and talked about where the bills were. So I don't want to repeat any of that. I just want to say that I wish we could quit having an equal pay day. Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't it be nice if we could just do away with that, because everything was the way it's supposed to be, and women were getting paid equal to men in the state of West Virginia and all across this country. But I don't anticipate that coming anytime soon. But what I do anticipate is that we're going to continue fighting at least as long as we can until that happens. Maybe not for ourselves, but for our children and our grandchildren and those to follow, because it is absolutely the right thing to do. And Barbara, I think somebody touched on transparency, and that is key. You know, when you can muzzle workers, whether they be in a factory or in an office setting, when you can muzzle workers and they're not allowed to talk about what they make, and you can ask people what they were making at previous jobs, and they can utilize that to suppress wages, I don't think we're ever going to advance. So those are two places that we absolutely have to start and move this forward. But I'm just honored to be a part of that fight. I've always put my money where my mouth is. I've donated to women's advocacy groups. I'm a big supporter, and I will be there for you for any way I can possibly help on this side of the hall. So thank you guys for what you do. I do have a committee meeting at 10 o'clock. So really want to thank you for giving me the time to meet with you. And my email is mike.caputo@wvsenate.gov. So anytime, and my cell number, if you want to write this down, because everybody in West Virginia has it by now. So it's 304-612-8692. Don't hesitate to text me or call me. And we can't give up. We just got to keep fighting. And Barbara gave you good advice. Get your folks to call the chairman of each of those committees and ask that this bill be placed on the agenda. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Senator Caputo. And now we welcome Delegate Danielle Walker of Monongalia County. Delegate Walker.
Good morning, everyone. I am Delegate Danielle Walker, and the time is right now. We are women. We birth nations, and we are due the respect and equal pay. We are no longer asking, we are demanding. And we want to make sure that we have every entity in place that we can speak about equal pay. See, we need to not only pay attention to the bills that Delegate Fleischhauer stated, but we also need to pay attention to Senate Bill 275 with the appellate courts, because it's going to do away the office of judges. So what does this office do? Well, this is where we bring those discriminatory gender cases. So when someone may talk about these issues, then we need the office of judges to protect us. I don't understand. In 2021, we are still fighting, but empowered women empower women. Empowered people make the change. And that time is right now. We are not backing down, and we are not going away. What have I endured being a Black woman for 44 years and counting? Before I even get to the interview, I have to make sure that my hair is acceptable. I need to make sure that I enunciate my words. I have to be careful even if the interviewee is asking me to repeat something, because if my voice raised, then my pay can go down. It doesn't matter if my education is equal, and if my experience is far exceeding from a counterpart. For Black women, it is a bigger barrier, because not only am I not getting the equal, I'm getting 20 cents lower than a white woman. These are the uncomfortable truths when we speak about pay. This is institutional racism. And we must stop the hate in our state, because the hurt you give is affecting us economically. Thank you. I am Delegate Danielle Walker.
Thank you so much, Delegate Walker. Now, Delegate Sean Hornbuckle from Cabell County will speak. Delegate Hornbuckle?
Yes, ma'am. I'm happy to be here. Delegate Sean Hornbuckle on Equal Pay Day. But as Senator Caputo said, Equal Pay Day, why do we have it? I don't think we should, because we need to be paying you all, women. As Beyonce said, women make the world go round. Women rule the world. And it's just simply that. As Delegate Danielle Walker said, the time is right now, because it just isn't right. And that's why the time is right now. Coming out of 2019, we had made some strides. We had made some strides in our country as far as women participation in the labor workforce. However, COVID has upended that. As we've seen now at the end of 2020, going into 2021, we're back down again. A lot of that is due to closures of daycare facilities, leisure places, retail, different healthcare facilities going down, again, because of COVID. So right now, with all those things happening, is again the time to strike and to make sure we're making things right, not just for equal pay, but making sure we're affording you the opportunities that you deserve and you need. Again, as Danielle Walker said it best, you birthed the whole nation. You all carry more than anyone can imagine. And I myself as a man can't walk in your shoes, but want to let you know that I'm walking beside you and with you, and will always do that. In addition to equal pay, we also have another initiative, which some of the people here, I think, are on that bill. It's House Bill 2640. And what that bill does is it seeks to give a tax credit to businesses who are promoting and hiring women and minorities into executive roles. So I think that's very important to help out with equal pay. So just know that I'm always going to be a fighter, and thanks to the good folks in our caucus. We have so many powerful women, and just want to keep it going, get more in the legislature. But right now, again, it is the time, and we have to get these bills across the finish line. So no matter what party, man or woman, it's just the right thing to do. And I'm just glad to be on you all's team to try to help do this.
Thank you so much, Delegate Hornbuckle. And thank you, all of you. I'd especially like to thank you all for working together for the people of West Virginia and everyone. So we'd love to hear your feedback and questions, what you learned, what questions you have. So enter those in the chat. And I've got some to begin with. So, and first I did want to ask that assure you that I'll be sending out, when you registered, you entered your email, and to those emails, Delegate Fleischhauer will share a document with me, and I will send you a document with the bill names and numbers, and the names and numbers of the people to call to help support this. And so here's a question. David Beard asks, please talk about fair pay in terms of experience levels, especially for private firms that don't have formal pay grids like public jobs.
I'm happy to take that, Beth, or I can at least start us off. Thanks, David, for the question. I think that pay inequity can be even worse in places where there isn't a formal, transparent pay grid. This kind of plays into the transparency piece. And often in firms like that, so much of advancement is relational, right? So if the boss is a male and is hanging out more with other males, it can kind of create this insider situation where the folks who have the most access are the ones who are considered for advancement and considered for salary increases, and maybe in the fold knowing what other folks' salaries are and those sorts of things. So I think that can actually, that kind of adds to the lack of transparency. And I'll also add that a big piece of the gender wage gap is the motherhood penalty. So mothers are often out of the workforce when they have a child, and that can impact their ability ability to be eligible for promotions. Say a mom is out of the workforce for 2 years, and then we look at her salary 2 years ago when she goes to apply for a new job. And that kind of speaks of that snowballing effect of pay discrimination. If her last salary reflects the market of 2 years ago, then that can kind of start to snowball the pay gap. And then the last thing I'll say, and hand it over to anyone else that wants to speak to this, is that there's research that shows that pay transparency is good for businesses as well. A lot of employees think that they're being paid, or there's more disparity in pay than there really is when there are secrecy policies. So allowing more openness actually increases morale, and we can share that research with folks if they're interested.
Thank you so much. I'd just like to be sure that to share what's in the lots of applause for Delegate Marshall. Thank you. Alina says, honestly, just a statement. It angers me that women are still dealing with this. And a request to hear from, and props to Delegate Zukov, a great champion for women, who's sorry not here. And here's a question. The legislature and governor want to encourage people to move to West Virginia by eliminating the income tax. Wouldn't closing the wage gap mean that more women, as well as their families, move here?
Does anybody want to start with that one? I think it would be a much more positive message than the risk that we would be taking with drastically cutting our income tax and the implications that might have for our school system, our higher ed system, and so many of things that we count on, like police and the Promise Scholarship. So that's one way to answer the question. Does anybody else want to take a shot at that? One thing I was thinking of, Owens, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, my only concern is that this was tried in Kansas with the governor, and it turned out to be quite disastrous for the state of Kansas, and they had to go back to with taxes because the governor had cut all the taxes out of Kansas. So, and that's a real concern, to really look at Kansas as an example of what could possibly happen.
That's a good point, Owens. You know, if you think about, we do have a somewhat gender segregated workforce, and a lot of women work in the public sector. And so if they're going to be cutbacks in the public sector, that is going to disproportionately affect women. Another thing, in response to what Kelly said about how this could be beneficial for everyone, the way 3247 is written, it isn't in the Human Rights Act. It really doesn't need to be, because this applies to everybody. If you're a white male and you wonder about your salary, it's going to benefit you that you can ask your fellow employees, female and male, white and black, what they're getting. Same thing about the salary history. You don't want to be lowballed if you're a white male or if you're a black male. It's going to benefit you. And so it's not really discrimination against protected classes. It's really about transparency and doing things that we are used to in collective bargaining agreements, in the public sector where the salaries are published. This is not a new notion that we should be able to have some openness about wages. And Delegate Zukov is on the call, and she is on the House Judiciary Committee. Lisa, do you want to say something? And thank you for joining us. You need to unmute yourself. Lisa.
There we go. Thank you, Barbara. I have been requesting, I actually met with Mark Capito from the very beginning of session, pushing for this bill, asking him weekly, trying to meet with him. And I think that he said, he told me yesterday there's a possibility, but I think the calls and emails from folks around the state asking would certainly help our cause to get the bill on the agenda. And we will do our part once it gets there to, fight hard to get the bill through committee so that we can move it to the floor. It would just have one single reference. We know I've experienced wage discrimination myself in the past. And I think it's really, really important that we bring this. I mean, honestly, I feel like I can't believe it's 2021 and we're still talking about this. It just blows my mind that it's still okay to discriminate against women and other minorities, that we can still have pay discrepancies. I mean, more women go to college than men. We've been in the workforce for a very, very long time. So it's just important for us to be together and to work hard to try to get this bill passed and bring it to the forefront. I think sometimes people are so beaten down with the effort that it's taken so many years to get this far, that we just have to keep up the good fight. And I thank everyone for being on the call to help us get there. Thanks, Barbara.
Oh, yeah. Thanks to everybody. One of the questions that Betty Rivard mentions, that these bills also apply to benefits as well as wages. So one of the really big things that happen to people who have a lower salary is that it ripples into the benefits they receive, especially their pensions and also their Social Security. I mean, it means that white women on average earn $500,000 less than men, all men, and Black women earn almost $1 million less on their pensions. We are talking about gigantic losses and really large unfairness. And that's something, we all have to do better when we do our job interviews and make sure that we get the information. That is something that we can all do ourselves. But if we are not, if it is wrong, if it is illegal for an employer to ask this salary history question, we are going to be better off, both men and women. Anybody else on this call besides me and Lisa who've experienced pay discrimination? And do you want to talk about it? I have. It hurts.
Barbara, I'll share my story, several actually. I was an executive director at a housing authority. And when I left to go to work in the private sector, I found out from a very angry woman who was still at the housing authority that they paid the next director coming in $10,000 more than me. $10,000. That's huge. And I had many years experience. And then when I went to work in the private sector, I was asked to sit in. There was a mediation going on around a dispute, actually a discrimination suit within the company. I was the only person that was left in it and part of the company's group. And they had let the other folks go. And as I sat there representing my company in the mediation, I learned that my pay was much less than the people I worked with. And the reason being was because I lived in West Virginia, even though I worked for a national company, and our cost of living was so much lower than where the other people lived. They justified my lack of pay for my lower cost of living. So it really hurts when you find that out, especially when you're a good, high-performing employee. And so those are my stories in a nutshell.
If you don't mind, even today, I work 3 jobs. I'm a legislator. I'm a direct care worker ×2. I homeschool my son. Still struggle. This is the reality of living in what? America? In almost heaven, West Virginia? See, almost is not good enough. And we're saying that today on Equal Pay Day. Almost is not good enough. Almost is unacceptable. See, we want it and we want it now. And don't tell me that you can't afford me because you've been cheating me for so many years. I'm not asking you for your interest on that back time. I'm telling you right now, when I walk into your office and I tell you my worth, then you need to find the pennies and pay me, because I've been getting crumbs for over 20 years. And when we walk in those offices, we need to walk with authority. And this is why we have these spaces, so we can educate each other, so we can make sure that we get the numbers from Kelly Allen. Make sure that you become a member of West Virginia Now, the NAACP. Make sure that you come back on April 8th for the other. We have to make sure that we keep growing this. And you are absolutely right. Equal pay affects my generational wealth. It affects my children. It affects if we're gonna pay for the mortgage or for the medication or to place food on the table. This is all intersectional. And we must make sure in all these processes that we have mental health.
The most egregious example of inequity is this. Just happened recently. The women's NCAA championship is going on at the same time the men's NCAA championship is going on. The men had a fitness room with up-to-date modern equipment and everything, and they gave the women an equipment room with one set of barbells. And that is an example of disparity of between men and women. To give the men a fitness room with all the updated equipment, and the women one set of barbells in their fitness room. I don't know how many of you saw that, but that is a prime example of what women go through in equity, not just in pay, but in other benefits and other things.
That's a great analogy, Owens. And actually, I don't know if any of you read in the chat, but we have a shero on this call, Barbara Scott, who in 1986 won a lawsuit against a national corporation suing for equal pay. Barbara, I'm not sure where you are, but would you be willing to talk about that and share? Because a lot of people may not know that story, what you had to put up with and what the, you know, how the suit went. Tell us about it.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you for inviting me to speak. We were a small group of, at that time, women in the plant other than secretaries and clerks. We were lab analysts. There was a position in the plant who only men had ever held, and they paid them $1.50 more an hour. We were called lab analysts. He was called a department analyst. In other words, he worked in the power plant. He only did water samples. He didn't do everything else that we did. We did more than he did, but he was getting paid $1.50 more. We were both members of the union. The union tried to address this in every negotiation. And I was on the union committee, so I know how it was addressed over the years. But, and we gradually worked it up till it was $1 apart by the time we sued, and then they wouldn't budge any farther, so we sued. Their response was that they tried to blame the union and said I was responsible for my own wages because I had not been more effective in negotiating against this multinational corporation. That the jury didn't take kindly to that. So we did win that lawsuit. We got we only got back pay from the time we had filed with the EEOC, but it was It did make a difference in the next negotiation. And like I said, they tried to name the International Chemical Workers Union, who had supported us from the beginning about this and always urged that be way. In the beginning, when I was hired at PPG, and I was required to have courses in chemistry and labs and so many other things and testing before I could be hired into the plant, but I was making less than the man who came in and started digging ditches. So gradually we just kept inching up every negotiation. And it was before, realized I started there in 68. So I'm kind of jumping around, I'm sorry. It's a long, complicated history, but we were finally successful. I was hired in 68 and started complaining, and we were successful in 86. And the union was very supportive, I have to say. Our international, our local presidents testified on our behalf and supported us in any way possible. But it was a two-part suit. One was pay, which the jury had, and the other was penalties, fines against the company for doing this. And the other part of that, the second part of it was a two-part trial. The second part was before Judge Stamp of Wheeling, who I know is well respected, but he ruled against us that PPG didn't have to pay a fine. But the jury ruled they had to pay us back pay. So as you saw ordinary people, your peers sitting there listening to what had gone on over the years from yourself, there was even a deathbed testimony from a union rep who wanted to make sure his words were heard against PPG and how he had fought with them for 20 years over this. And when your peers hear how you are really treated, they don't realize. They think, oh, you're working in a big corporation like that, you're doing good. But like, as you said, it doesn't impact just your wages you take home every day. It impacts your Social Security. It impacts your benefits. It impacts your vacation pay. Our vacation pay was based on a percentage of our wages for the first 2 weeks of our vacation pay. So it impacted how much we had to go on vacation with our families, if we could. It's hard for people who, we look at others and think, oh, they have it really good, or they don't have it that bad. When they see the details, the jurist looks on their face. They looked at us all, and just one guy was sitting there and he had tears in his eyes. He couldn't believe that we'd been fighting it this long. But I don't consider myself a she-hero. I was one of 12. And there were 18 women in the group, but some felt too much pressure. They couldn't deal with it. They didn't want to go up against the corporation. And we had wonderful, Pat from Wheeling was our attorney, and one of our attorneys. The other was Stan Burish from Belmont County. And Pat Cassidy has always been a champion for equal rights and for working people. And I can't commend him enough, but I have to give so much credit. Belonging to a union makes a difference. They weren't able to force it at the table. They couldn't take 700 people out on strike over 18 people, but they made it an issue every time and held it out as long as they could. And the corporations will blame you. They'll say you want too much, that you expect too much. But the problem is we don't expect enough. We accept too much easily. And we cannot accept the status quo, whether it be in wages, benefits, living conditions, working conditions. I'm sorry, I got off on a tangent there. Thank you for
so
letting
much.
me speak.
Thank you so much, Barbara. That was an excellent story. And thank you, everyone, our wonderful presenters. And so I'd like to remind you that if you have ideas for further programming or want to partner with us, please reach out through the survey about today's session. There's a place there that you can reach out to us, and we're easy to find as well. Thank you, everybody. It's been a great session, and especially those of you, I know the delegates, senators need to get back to work. In fact, I think a couple of them already went. So thank you so much. Have a good day.